Um, Thank you, everyone. This talk, I'm trying to kind of use it as a springboard to the roundtable discussions. Well, I'd like to think of different questions. So far, the main question discussed has been, what is well-being? That is, what is its meanings in various disciplines? In this talk, I would like to think of the practical dimensions of well-being. And my question would be of how instead of what. I will try to map the answers to the question, how to produce well-being through digital media. This question is vast and has some preliminary, and therefore some preliminary funneling is required. I would like to start with a mapping offered by two researchers who are studying the link between well-being and digital media. Dorian Peters and Rafael Calvo are digital user interface researchers. They coined the term positive computing to denote a research field in user interface design that is intended to augment the user's well-being. They map digital applications according to the approaches to well-being that guide the developers. So the first approach is none. Well-being is not systematically considered in the design, as evidence is in most technologies today. The second one is the preventive. Obstacles or compromises to well-being are treated as errors and trigger redesign. For example, imagine a redesign of Facebook undertaken when an evaluation reveals that a certain interface element encourages cyberbullying, as we saw in the presentations before. The third one is active. Technology is designed to actively support determinants of well-being in an application that has a different overall goal. Active technologies are those in which a new feature is added to specifically promote one or more factors of well-being. For example, software designers might choose to add a thanks button based on the evidence that expressing gratitude increases the overall well-being. And the fourth one, dedicated, a technology that is purpose-built and dedicated to fostering well-being in some way, as Ronnie indicated at the end of the last session. And these apps are built from ground up to promote one or more factors of well-being. In this paper, I will discuss just the last type of applications. I will ask how we can obtain well-being as defined by the disciplines discussed so far, at least most of them. I will suggest 3 generic strategies to foster well-being, and I will illustrate how each strategy can be implemented in digital media. The first strategy is mimicking. You can find it in advertisements. Drink Coca-Cola and you will feel as happy as this guy. Use this cream every night and you will be as lovely as this actress or model. Interestingly, advertisements in the past were more abstract and showed the product itself or its logo, like a parrot to sell coffee. That's a true example. I have it in my kitchen. They were more informative and were less intended to manipulate our feelings. The rationale was to provide information, just to provide information. Contemporary advertisements, however, attempt to show you the effect you're likely to have once you perform the recommended mimicking. The effect is quite similar across all products and services. If you do like the model, you will be beautiful, young, slim, and above all, happy. The same logic of mimicking also lies behind the act of being a fan. Have you ever wondered why people, especially young ones, wear the same clothes as the target of worship? Back to advertisements, this is the reason why advertisers use famous people in their ads. Neurologists have found limbic structures in the brain that are in charge of mimicking and of what they call emotional contagion. This is the basis, they claim, for higher levels of empathy. The mimicking strategy can be traced back to the Renaissance, a period in which artists and scientists made significant efforts to produce copies of real life. In the arts, the perspective was invented by Alberti, camera obscura was implemented as a painting technique that shows real life on the screen drawing, and Leonardo da Vinci dissected corpse in order to properly represent the human body in his drawings. This strategy is still being used in the arts. Yoko Ono has been collecting short films of smiling people around the world since 1967. In the 21st century, she continues this project with the help of Instagram and a mobile app named #SmileFilm. Once pictures are tagged by the hashtag, they can be viewed globally and locally on a world map and together as a film. The application description states, "Our smiles change moods and opinions as they radiate positive energy out into the world, creating joy, healing, peace, changing the universe for the better." As you can understand, the digital production of happiness as mimicking is simple. Take a smiling model and describe her or him with the minimum relevant details. People will follow and mimic in hope to obtain the effect of happiness. Some developers believe that choosing the smiling face while ignoring the frowns can reduce stress and improve self-confidence. Other applications take a more textual approach and present a sentence with a positive message accompanied by a smiley. Now let's move to the second strategy. The second strategy belongs to a later period in human history, the Industrial Revolution. Karl Marx in Das Kapital beautifully describes the early days of that revolution as manufactura. As its name implies, it was a production, factura, by the hand, articulated into small jobs. The course of work was broken into sub-processes, and each worker was in charge of a fraction of the production. Next, the factory emerged, and many workers were replaced by machines. But in both cases, raw materials entered from one side and finished goods came out on the other. The whole production is black-boxed, hiding complex processes and internal codependencies. This black-boxing, I assert, is an essential element of the Industrial Revolution and is dominant in the thinking patterns associated with this historical period. Happiness can be produced, according to some practitioners, in a similar way. If you smile 3 times a day, the result will be an increase in your happiness. We don't know how the black box works. We may have some neurological explanations, but what is important is not the internal processes, but the results. One blogger named Leo Widrich wrote in 2013 a post titled "Practice Smiling in Front of the Mirror." And he says, "Here's something I've done for almost a few years in the morning. Stand in front of the mirror and smile. Practice to activate both your mouth corners and your eye sockets. You will know whether your smile is genuine because you will immediately feel happy and relaxed." Yeah, immediately. Okay? The power of a smile, even practiced in the mirror, is that it can invoke the emotion immediately. That's what he's saying. Now, unlike mimicking that requires some presence of another person, this strategy refers to the person as a small factory. On one side, raw materials are provided, a mirror and a smile, and on the other side, the product is ready to be shipped. The feeling of happiness and relaxation. In the digital world, we see applications for the mobile phone that attempt to follow the same logic of mechanization. Here are a few examples. The developers of Happier app believe that sharing positive events in life can make one happier. So with this app, the user writes about something that made him or her happy, and here I quote, like getting those jeans you coveted for less than half of the original price. Okay? Or another one which is more objective, I would say, seeing a new grandchild for the first time. Then the user can share the happiness sensation through Facebook or the app. But apparently, the developers of Happier do not think that some people might be depressed when seeing that everybody around them is having fun while their lives are gray at best. Get Happy, it takes a more proactive approach than the previous app. It provides an occasional reminder to put on a happy face. In terms of user interface, it nudges. Now, nudging is a well-known concept in user interface design. It assumes responsibility on the user and leaves her the choice of what to do. Yet it attempts to shape the decision-making process and persuade the user to take what the application developers believe is the right choice. Because it provides a specific guidance, I tend to classify this app under the mechanization strategy. And the third strategy is the most complex, I have to apologize, and I name it code. The term code does not mean a codex and is not used in the religious or legal context. And in that sense, it's very similar to your suggestion to policy making, to the next generation of policy making. Instead, it refers to a compilation of formulae that operates in a dynamic reality. It is a code in the sense that biologists represent DNA or computer programmers designate the inscription of an algorithm. Such a code produces various results, also known as mutations. It is a code that points to an orientation, to some orientations, but without putting them in a limiting way of do and don't do codex-like rules. It is a set of orientations and not of complete solutions, because the complete solutions should be tailored to the specific circumstances. Now, recently, designers started focusing on the code approach. They adopt key themes from psychological theories like those presented yesterday, like SDT and positive psychology. This new focus has yielded two interesting movements in the last year or two. One is positive design, and the other, I already mentioned, positive computing. Although both use the word positive, probably as an homage to positive psychology, they also integrate some of the basic principles of SDT. So, positive design. Positive design is an effort to rethink design as a discipline. It is led by Anna Polymeyer and Peter de Smet, who are the heads of the Delft Institute of Positive Design. Their mission is design for well-being. I have identified 5 principles that guide positive designers. Now, the first one goes from short-term to long-term. Polymeyer and de Smet explore the question of how design can evolve from focusing on short-term positive experiences to promoting long-term well-being. They assert that design that feels good, but does not necessarily design feels good, but not necessarily support happiness. The second one goes from universal to specific solution. The solution, they claim, cannot be a single one that, quote, that will make everyone immediately forever happy. This would be illusory. Instead, it is all about the little things and frequent reinforcement in everyday life that in sum contribute to sustainable increases in happiness. This principle is what I termed here as a code that produces mutations so that there is a multiplicity of solutions adapted to various contexts and circumstances. The third, from problem-oriented to possibility-oriented. Positive design calls designers to go beyond the common approach that is oriented towards the physical fix, i.e., intended solely to reduce the bad effects or even prevent or remove them. This is very similar to the classification of positive computing that I presented earlier in the introduction of my talk. Positive designers call this old approach problem-oriented strategy or solutionism because focusing on solving practical problems does not free us from considering the potential impact this solution has on experience and well-being. In philosophy of technology, a similar effort was made as a redefinition of the notion of prosthesis that shifts the attention from fixing and replacing to opening new horizons. Bernard Stiegler has formed this very clearly back in 1994. And he's saying, a prosthesis does not supplement something, does not replace what would have been there before and would have been lost. It is added. The prosthesis is not a mere extension of the human body. It is the constitution of this body qua human. It is not a means for the human, but its end. Against the problem-oriented approach, Polymeyer and De Smet offer the possibility-oriented approach, which is intended to increase, enhance, and enable good effects. Like Stiegler's notion of prosthesis, it enables the opening of new horizons in everyday life. Put differently, possibility-oriented design focuses on the facilitating aspects and attempts to enable a meaningful experience. That is the ground for the call by some leading designers to look for design that will enhance the well-being of healthy people. Polymeyer and De Smet bring the example of Good Night, an application, an alarm application composed of a timer with a social layer, so that team members who have to reach the same early flight know about each other. This couples the functionality of an alarm clock with the social awareness in the hope that it will be developed into empathy. Now to the fourth one, from well-being to well-doing. Polymeyer and De Smet emphasizes that in a literal sense, our happiness is increasingly a matter of well-doing rather than merely well-being. Design for them should focus on the activities enabled by the product or the service. And they write, the notion of well-being and the emphasis on experiences and activities are in line with an understanding of happiness as a way of living rather than an end state of ideal circumstances. If there is ever such a thing as ideal circumstances, this perspective offers a new rationale to products and services, a meaningful one. This is exactly what we are trying to look here, right? In other words, design for well-being is different as it requires something more oriented to behavior and the mind. Mark Hassenzahl, in an article nicely titled, Let's Design Happy People, explains that design for happiness means design with the goal of creating meaningful experiences. It is not about adding new activities, as some positive psychologists advise, but rather the creation of well-being through fine-tuning existing practices. It is the mundane that should be rejuvenated with more happiness. Hassenzahl uses an example of creating meaningful experiences that also explains, I think, the difference between the mechanization and the code. With mechanization, you should follow Seligman's instructions to express gratitude, i.e., sit down, write a gratitude speech, contact the person you want to thank, and set a meeting without telling the purpose of the meeting. Then, during the meeting, you read out the speech, you read it loudly, yeah? And the result, Seligman promises, tears of happiness. And a sense of happiness, he says, lasting for more than a month. That's what Seligman says. Conversely, the code strategy would recommend that gratitude should be tailored into everyday practices and become a part of our portfolio of behaviors. It should change according to the context, so that expressing gratitude to a family member will be different from that expressed to a teacher, a colleague, or a friend. It is not just the selection of different words, it is the whole scenario that should be different. And the last one, 5. The fifth element of positive design is offered by Jeremy Meyerson, who is a world-known designer. He urges designers to transcend the feasibility and viability yardsticks. And his alternative is desirability. And he writes, desirability is now king. Not King Kong, but king, yeah. What, after all, is the point of developing smart robot technologies to care for the elderly if such solutions are viewed as socially unacceptable? Now, like positive design, positive computing also calls for new thinking by a professional community, computer programmers in this case. Positive computing also takes the code approach, and the godfathers of this approach, Peters and Calvo, they write, "It is naive to suggest that a digital system as complex as, for example, Facebook or a multiplayer video game is simply good or bad for well-being. One system represents a large number of actual experiences. Two people will use Facebook in very different ways and with different impacts on their well-being. Likewise, as research on cooperative shooter game has shown, a game can both support cooperation and increase aggression at the same time. We need to be wary, therefore, of the overly simplistic analysis and instead seek to unpack those aspects which are positive or negative for well-being, in what context, when, and for whom." End of quote. These authors adopt the code approach in the sense that there is no one solution that fits all, and what is harmful for one can be beneficial for another. Like expressing gratitude, the process Seligman described cannot be performed in the same way by everyone in every corner of the world. In Israel, it wouldn't have worked. And adaptations should be undertaken. Due to time limitation, I will bring just one example of a mobile application that attempts to produce well-being through code. ECHO. The Human-Computer Interface Lab at the University of California, Santa Cruz has developed the ECHO app. It is a personal microblogging mobile app that allows the user to record and reflect on past experiences. The recording is expected to help people better understand themselves, i.e. self-reflection, and their habits, and eventually should foster behavior change. Now, put differently, it is a digital technology designed to produce behavioral transformation. Today, tracking is a very popular practice, dominating self-improvement tactics in various fields such as health, fitness, sleep, diet, etc. According to one very recent report, 31% of all US consumers use quantified self-tool to track their health and fitness, food, diet, sleep, and or mood. Tracking is believed to lead to self-improvement as it provides information. But as we know, information should be transformed into knowledge, and knowledge into actions. And this chain is not always maintained. And unfortunately, frequently the provisioning of mere data is considered sufficient. So I'll go to the summary. In this talk, I sketched 3 strategies to produce well-being through digital media. The first was mimicking, and was exemplified by applications that display smiling face or short text with a smiley icon. The second strategy was mechanization, and there I brought applications that enable sharing of happy moments or nudge with an occasional reminder to smile. The third strategy was code, and here I described some of the latest trends in design and human-computer interface research. The examples were a platform to produce empathy in a very specific situation of an early flight, and a tracking application that attempts to lead to self-reflection and later to possibly behavioral change. This classification is not rigid, and some applications have elements from 2 strategies or more, probably in an attempt to be more efficient. However, the question of efficiency in this emerging field is not an easy one, as we saw yesterday, and I hope that together we will be able to formulate some new exciting directions for both applications and the measurements of their efficiency. Thank you.